This year at First Presbyterian Church, we have been reading through the entire New Testament, book by book. And the last book in the New Testament is, of course, that wonderful and, some would say, weird book of the book of Revelation. Even though at the very beginning of the book, Jesus encourages us and tells us that we would be blessed if we would read it out loud and hear it and keep the words, it's one of the books I think that many people choose to avoid. And what we want to do in this introduction is to encourage you to begin to read the book of Revelation, but with a measure of understanding, with just a little bit of knowledge, with a few key points about the book. It opens up a whole world of the book of Revelation, and you'll find it's much more accessible than you think. Jesus tells us at the very beginning of the book of Revelation that how blessed we would be if we were to read these words aloud, to hear them, and to keep them. And so it's unfortunate that many Christians feel like they need to avoid it. I suspect they do so because, to begin with, they have no idea what to do with it. They can't make heads or tails out of it with all its seemingly crazy images. And others have said they don't like it because they think that it's a very scary book. Well, for Christians, it's not scary at all. You'll find out that it is a glorious book with wondrous messages of redemption and a new heaven and a new earth. But also, the images aren't as strange as they might seem at first glance. If there's just a few things that you keep in mind as you approach this book, then maybe you have a better understanding of what it is you're reading. First of all, the book was written by the Apostle John, very late in his life. And some scholars suggest it's somewhere in the 80s, maybe early 90s. And John has been exiled to a little island out the Aegean Sea called Patmos because of his preaching and because of his faith. And the Lord Jesus comes to him and reveals to him many of these crazy images, or what seem like crazy images. Why do they seem so crazy? It's because John has a very difficult task. He's supposed to describe, because he's told to write all this down, he's told to describe the indescribable. Well, all we have is human language and images and things that we relate to here on earth. But how do you describe heaven? How do you describe these supernatural things with just human language? Well, to deal with this, John has chosen a very specific type of literature that was very popular, say, 200 BC to about 200 AD. And it's called apocalyptic literature. It's a very particular type of literature. Daniel uses it. Sometimes Jesus even uses it when he talks about the moon turning red and all these different kinds of things. But what it is, it's a very creative, very image-oriented type of expression. The first thing you might want to know about apocalyptic literature is that in contrast to something like the book of Romans, which is designed to appeal to your intellect, or maybe many of the Psalms that are designed to help you engage with your emotions as it relates to your faith, the book of Revelation, apocalyptic literature, is designed to appeal to your imagination. So imagine if you're walking through a art museum and you're looking at different pictures, and the artists there are not necessarily trying to give you photographs, but he's trying to speak to you, or she is trying to speak to you through the different images that they chose to use. Well, John does the very similar thing to try to describe the indescribable. And oddly enough, we often use apocalyptic language even now without even realizing it. Consider this. I know many of you have gone shopping at a shopping mall during Christmas time. Oi, you know what that experience is like. It can be very frustrating because there's so many people there. It's hard to find a parking place, and it's hard to get what you want because the shelves have already been picked over, and especially up north, everybody's wearing coats and sweaters, and inside the mall it's very warm. So supposing after that experience you went home and wrote an email out to a friend. I just came from the shopping mall, and you said, and there were 1 million people there. Well, were you telling the truth? Well, obviously, in one sense, no, there were not literally 1 million people there. But in another way, you were telling the truth because you were trying to invoke and provoke in your reader a sense of what that experience must have been like. They can relate. There were so many people there that they can conjure up what that must have been like. Now, imagine, though, if 500 years later, somebody found that email, an archaeologist, let's say, and they say, well, see, now this proves that back in that time, there had to have been at least 30 to 40 million people living in Southwest Florida, because at any given time, there were 1 million people at the market. No, they totally missed the point. You use that kind of language to give some kind of an image in a person's mind for the truth that you're trying to say. Well, John uses these kinds of techniques on a regular basis because he's trying to appeal to your imagination as he's trying to describe the indescribable. The other thing about the book of Revelation and apocalyptic literature is that it's appealing on two different levels of understanding. One of the things we must understand the whole time you're reading the book of Revelation is realize who his primary audience is. His primary audience is persecuted Christians. And his goal is to give encouragement to persecuted Christians. So in that way, the book of Revelation is relevant in any era that you're reading it. Because Christians are always through the ages have been persecuted in one way or another, even today. But at the same time, apocalyptic literature is always in the context of end times. So we not only get encouragement for the here and now, but we also start getting a glimpse of things that we might expect and things that we may have to experience, or we will have to experience, when the actual end time comes. So with those two different types of understanding of what you're reading, you discover that the book of Revelation really is a masterpiece of writing. And also John is up against the fact that if the Romans get a hold of this thing, especially when he's very critical of Rome, it may appear very seditious. So he also has to write in a way that the Romans have no idea what is being written, but his readers would. So one of the things that John does is he draws on the Old Testament. The book of Daniel, for instance. There's many images that Daniel wrote, and then his audience would have understood, oh, yeah, that's what Daniel was talking about, and that John is writing about the same thing. Now, John gives us a clue as to his methodology. In the very first chapter, he gives us an image, or at least Jesus gave John an image in order to write. We always have to remember that this isn't John's original work, but rather it is a product of the Holy Spirit. Jesus is speaking to him, telling him to write this down. And John is trying to do that task. And right in the very first chapter, we get an example of how apocalyptic literature works, because it's the only time John gives us the image and the explanation. And it goes something like this. There are 7 golden lampstands, and walking among those 7 lampstands is a very regal-looking figure with stars in his hands. Now, right away, you say, well, how am I supposed to understand something like that? All right, well, he explains it. You remember when Jesus told us that we were the light of the world? And he said, you don't take a lamp and put it under a bushel, a light, but you put it up on what? A lampstand. So these 7 lampstands are representing the 7 churches that he's writing to. Now, of course, 7 has always been the traditional number for perfection or completion. So really, Jesus is talking to the whole church. but directing it specifically to these 7 churches. Notice their golden lampstands, because these are precious. These are precious people, precious churches. But they're supposed to, even times of persecution, supposed to be spreading light. They're supposed to be spreading the gospel. But Jesus wants them to understand that they aren't doing this all by themselves. But as he promised, I am with you always. So this figure, this regal figure that's walking among the lampstands, it represents Jesus himself, and he describes it very much the way Daniel did. And they go, oh, yes, I understand who that's supposed to be. And so what he's trying to say is that when you are witnessing, when you're being the light of the world in times of persecution, you don't have to fear. Why? Because I'm with you. I'm moving along with you. And in the palm of my hand, I have the leadership of the churches. That's what the 7 stars represent. So you can see that's a little glimpse into John's methodology by using apocalyptic literature to describe then all what must take place. Now, for the rest of the book, he doesn't give us those explanations. But we get an idea of how he's using imagery. And so as we go through, there's a couple more things we want to keep in mind. That one of the things we want to be careful about is not to try to interpret all of the various scenes with a wooden literalism. My example about the million people, that's a perfect example. In a way, you are telling the truth, but it's not literally a million. And so you want to ask yourself when you read some of these images, why did he choose that particular image? Just like why would a painter choose a particular image to get across what he or she is trying to communicate? The other thing is never lose sight of the fact that he's giving encouragement to persecuted Christians. You could really sum up the book this way, very simply. God wins, Satan loses. Whose side are you on? That's pretty much what the whole book is about. And of course, we know that God, being the almighty creator of the universe, Satan is no match for him. So of course God is going to win. And when we get to the end of the book, we see how Satan and all of his minions and even death itself is destroyed. That's one funeral I would like to go to. And so the end result is that God will be victorious and Jesus will return to establish his kingdom forever. So with these messages, what John is trying to say to his readers is no matter how bad it gets, be faithful. Even if it means being faithful unto death. Because no matter how bad it gets, God was still the victor, and you want to make sure you're found in him when the end time comes. And so you're going to see a pattern as you read through the book. After that first chapter, where he gives a hint as to his methodology, he then writes a series of short little notes to those 7 churches. And the value of those little notes is not only to see what the church at the time was up against, but it's a good opportunity for us to kind of see how we're doing. What kind of letter would Jesus write to us in our own day and age? And so it's helpful to read what he had to say to those particular 7 churches, how he commended them and how he expressed his concern. And what you're going to notice in every case is that he's basically trying to say to the churches, look, I have to make sure that you are all in, that you are 100% committed to me and to the gospel. Because if you're not going to be able to withstand the tribulation that's coming. So we would do well to read those letters and to make sure that we as a community of faith are doing what Jesus wants us to do and be willing to repent and do better in those areas that we're not. But then the pattern that you see through the next several chapters is a series of tableaux, if you will, or different scenes. And try to be less concerned about chronology. There is some chronology in the book of Revelation, as you'll see as you read through it. But it's not always necessarily, well, this follows then this and this and this and this. But he gives us different scenes, and the pattern goes something like this. He comes up, or he's shown anyway, some of the worst scenes you can imagine. It's all kinds of travails are going on in the world. Some of them are caused by people. Others are caused by this fellow called the Antichrist that will come someday. And some of them represent the wrath of God. But whatever it is, wherever the source is, some terrible scenes are being shown. That's why some people think it's very scary. But you'll notice that in between each one of those scenes It shifts from awful, terrible, traumatic to a heavenly scene of hope and victory. And then another terrible scene. And then another vision of hope and victory. And then another scene. And he keeps doing that until the very end. Again, to emphasize, guys, gals, brothers and sisters, no matter how bad it gets, do not fear. Do not give up. Persevere. Because remember the heavenly scenes that are being shown. God is the victor, and you want to be part of that. One of the things we want to be very careful of is to try to predict when the end time will come. It will come because Jesus did promise that he was going to return. And when he does, he's going to make all things right. And so in the book of Revelation, as I said earlier, we're going to see some things, we're going to learn some things that what we should expect when that eventually comes. But Jesus said, don't try to figure out when this is going to happen. I don't even know, Father only. But that's exactly what people try to do. They end up writing a book and they make a whole boatload of money predicting when the end is going to come, and then of course it doesn't come, so they have to write a new edition, make more money, and all that does is it makes Christians more confused. But rather, Jesus said, what you need to do is just make sure you're prepared. Whether it's next week, whether it's 5,000 years from now, that's entirely up to God. We just have to make sure that we do our part. Why do you suppose that Jesus didn't tell us? Well, because what's going to happen? Supposing the end is supposed to come in 2024, what is everybody going to do up to that point? Do whatever they want, and they figure, okay, so the end is coming, so I'll get my act together. So no, we're not doing that. We want you to make sure that you are prepared now, because you have no idea when that thief in the night is going to come. So you need to be prepared as we speak. Oh, and by the way, in the meantime, there's going to be persecution. And as Jesus told those churches initially, I need for you to be totally committed now, or you're not going to be able to face the tribulation, the challenges that come. I can't use you, so I'm going to remove your lampstand. So we do not want that to happen. The other thing that we've discovered is that he's going to mention this person called the Antichrist. Okay, who is the Antichrist? Well, believe me, when the time comes when, I assume he shows up, there'll be no question. But what has happened all through the ages is a whole bunch of people have gotten their turn being the Antichrist. Popes and emperors and kings, Napoleon, Hitler, Stalin, the Ayatollah Khomeini, even Donald Trump and Barack Obama got a turn, all of which was nonsense. There will be no question that when the Antichrist comes, the whole world will be following him, going after him. And none of the people I named was that the case. The other thing is that we must not be caught up in whenever somebody appears in Jerusalem or in New York City or somewhere saying, I'm Jesus returned, I'm the Messiah. And everybody goes, maybe he is. No. The book of Revelation makes it absolutely clear that when Jesus returns, every eye will see him. There'll be no question. He's not going to sneak into New York or to Jerusalem or be born as a baby in an obscure Bethlehem like he did the first time. When he returns, the whole world will see, everyone, including those who pierce him. So with this little bit of information, hopefully it opens up so you understand what it is you're reading. It is a very specific type of literature, and you want to get your creative symbolism type of hat on as you're reading and being encouraged by John, really by Jesus, in any age, and looking forward to that time when the great upheaval on the earth will occur, and you'll read many different characteristics of what that will be like. But in the end, when Jesus returns, all will be made right. He will establish his kingdom, and we will live with him in a place where every tear will be wiped away. So friends, I invite you to start reading the book of Revelation expectantly. Don't be afraid of it. Don't try to avoid it. Don't keep telling yourself that you can't understand it. Oh, you can. It was given to us to understand, to encourage us, to be able to have that end time perspective of our own lives, and realizing that when you and I close our eyes for the last time in this life, that's not the end of the story for us. If anything, it's the very beginning. and that when Jesus returns, we will be with him, we will reign with him, and we will be able to experience that indescribable joy that comes when being with him. Look forward to the book of Revelation. Embrace it. You may have to read it a number of times, but of course, all the books of the Bible we should read numbers of times. We come back to it and come back to it for more blessing. So, I invite you to engage in the book of Revelation expecting to be blessed. Well, thank you for listening. Good reading. God bless you.